Round 5, track breakdown. The consensus was all of the crashes and the mistakes. So we are going to highlight those, from Eli Tomac to what's going on with his ankle, to Ken Roczen and the lappers, to Sexton just blowing it up out front, to Pierce Brown breaking his T5. So to start off this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, but watch Eli Tomac as he puts his Achilles repaired left foot down, and it gets just smashed by the foot peg because he puts his foot down and hits the jump, and then the motorcycle just rams into the back. Oh, man, and the sheer amount of just inertia and force, I bet that sucker is swollen and bigger than my pregnant wife at the moment, and hopefully he is able to line up for round 6, because I don't want to see him go out like this, especially with an injury. If anyone has ever had like a false gate where the gate doesn't go down and you move forward and your feet are locked in front of the foot pegs, oh my goodness, your ankles, they just scream bloody murder as you endo over the gate. I know a few people, including myself, that have made that mistake. And so honestly, seeing it from this angle gives me hope that it is not as bad as I once thought, because he was able to ride during the night show and salvage some points. You know, you become a champion on your worst nights. So for him to just do that gives me hope that he is going to be able to just take a cortisone shot and just man the F up and get inside the top 10. So for this weekend, I'm hoping Tomac just lines up. If he lines up, it is a win. But again, to overview what went down, was he sticks his foot out, and a lot of these guys end up holding their feet onto the foot pegs. They don't lean down and stick that leg out for balance anymore unless there's a huge rut, but they just tend to stay on their toes. Well, he didn't get back onto the foot pegs in time, and he ended up putting that foot down right in front of the launch ramp, and then he just gets smashed from his foot peg from behind. Oh, and that looks like a gnarly twist. So I bet that ankle is sprained as well, because the internal rotation is probably what is messing him up at the moment. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he tore some ligaments inside that ankle. And these whoops were incredibly sharp. Here, this is an angle of Pierce Brown with his crash where he just hits the tough block with one of his foot pegs, and it just sends him over. And unfortunately, he just goes head first. That's the problem there. That's why he broke his back. And from what I've heard, he can feel his toes, but he did have surgery. And what a way to go out, man. That was horrible to watch. And we saw lots of crashes happening through the whoops. And honestly, just from hitting tough blocks, from RJ hitting a tough block to even one of the cameraman chasing Kenny hitting a tough block. This was not good, and I'm glad that he had surgery, but I want to see video of him walking is truthfully what I want to see. And really the only thing that happened here is these guys, if you watched my track analysis, I told you that they were going to hug real tight to the tough blocks because they don't want to be in the middle where it's just the sharpest and the most beat up of the whoops. Yes, there gets to be a little bit of a V there, but these guys gravitate towards the inside and the outside, and it also sets them up to rail into the sand by carrying his momentum. However, when you are riding that ragged edge, when that ass end kicks around because of the curbs in the whoops, you end up sometimes tagging the tough blocks. And this begs to differ, like, should we maybe have tough blocks off on the concrete to make things safer and in the middle of the track rather than on the actual whoops themselves? Because the tough blocks have honestly been hurting the riders more than saving them. I mean, if we look at even Hunter Lawrence, when he was racing, yes, his seat bounce wasn't completely straight, so he drifted wide, but then he just lands and nails a tough block. Boom. Even though he was theoretically still on the track, because those tough blocks are about 12 inches on the track. I honestly want to have a conversation as to why the tough blocks need to be on the landings of jumps. They should be probably more so off to the side of the landings in case they come off the track, not actually hit an obstacle on the track. So let me know what you think about that in the comments below. But what happened here was he's not straight up and down. He's still tilted sideways. So when he goes to preload, because there's no ruts on the face of the jump, he preloads and then it just drifts him wise because of inertia. He's not hitting the jump straight. He's hitting the jump sideways and he's seat bouncing it. And this is honestly where we saw a few weeks ago where Deegan ended up casing one of the huge triples. I believe it was at San Diego before the finish line, and it's because he seat bounced while the motorcycle wasn't completely straight up and down. He ends up tattooing himself to, I want to say the pavement, but it's really just the dirt, the launch of the other jump, because he hit the tough block. And it almost seems like it could have been avoided. He says that he's going to be healthy here, but also I've heard that he's got a broken collarbone or a separated shoulder. I don't know exactly which one, but he says that he's working on getting 100% healthy. And here's just a fun, just moto porn for rider technique, and it comes from Jason Anderson. Oh, beautiful little slide here. And what is he doing? First off, look at how deep this sand is. This is the size of an 85 dirt bike. And he just slices through it, lifts his foot up and over because he couldn't fit through it if he was on his foot pegs. So he has to just lift up and over, sits down, and then he's weighting the outside peg. You can see how he's moved his ass crack over, right? So he's not just completely straight up with the bike, and he's weighting that outside peg so that he can allow that motorcycle to drift wide. And just beautiful acceleration. Look at that. Just the flat trackers would be super impressed with Jason Anderson's just flat track ability. Here, I'll watch that in real time. Okay, now there's lots of argument about the lappers here. We have Cooper Webb, who was able to pass Ken Roczen, and he got into the most difficult part of the racetrack, which is that sand section where you just have to keep it WFO. If you don't, it's going to slow you down. You're going to crash, or it's just going to hit you in a trajectory that you're not really planning. You can try to go straight, but if that rut is all sideways, that's where you're headed. So what do we see? Kenny tries to split two privateers, right? Yes, they are lappers, but they are racing for top 15, which is a decent like $3,000 for these guys. You've got Hand, who's a 2-digit, which is legit. You know, he is a good rider. Tristan Lane, we know he is a good rider, and he's just a casualty on all of this. But truthfully, if I have to say anything, it is that the lappers should have stopped their race, because the rules say that you get a fine if you impede the progress of a leader, and I believe it's about a $5,000 fine, and I don't think any of these riders have gotten it. So sure, AMA let it slide this time, but it should be talked about at the riders meeting that, hey, if you don't get the F out of the way, you are going to pay a fine. And that would be the first thing for these privateers that are racing for $3,000 would be to slow their ass down and let the riders, the faster guys, let them by, because they're going to lose all of the money that they win and still owe some, right? That would be the number one. Number two, right, is if I had to say anything, Kenny picked the worst moment to try to split some riders was in the sand section. And that was really what happened. But again, you can't fault Kenny because he is racing for a championship. He was down around 4 points at this point, and no pun intended. And his night ended because his chain guide ripped off. And boom, there goes his chain. And poor Tristan Lane doesn't make near as much money because he gets taken out. Same thing with Hand. It was just a one stone for three birds kind of a thing. So if we watch here, if these guys were racing, there weren't any lappers. So hypothetically, if this was just everybody was on the same lap, these ruts come together, plain and simple. It didn't mean to have this happen, just a sheer mistake, but they did see the blue flags. And this is honestly where we've talked a lot about the radios, where during the mechanics area, you could see that coming. And I know I've talked to nauseam about having another class for the guys that don't have factory equipment and could still showcase what they're made of. But this was really just a wrong place, wrong time. Don't split lappers during the worst sand section imaginable that we've had all year. But it is unfortunate, and I wish it didn't happen. So that's really all we have to say there. Because what happens when you don't keep a WFO in the sand? Watch Levi Kitchen. It just stops him and it sends him off the track and he crashes. And what was this? This was essentially just because he lacked the conviction of just being wide open. Maybe it was because of the rider in front of him where you're usually trying to double on top of that. But no, he landed and he was just sent off the track because that's where the line was going for the sand. You know, you slow down in the sand and you go down. That's basically what happens. The sand section, really the only way to get through it is to close your eyes and just be wide open. You want to shift up. You don't want to be in a lower gear because you're just going to spin. And it looks like when he slowed down and got on the gas, he just spun. And that ass end went to the left and he went to the right. Boom. And what I found interesting because of how much sand there was, watch Tom Vial. And usually you put baby powder on top of your goggles in the foam to keep the sand out of your eyes. But look what he's doing. He's actually putting like Vicks Vapor Rub or something similar on his eyebrows to keep the sand out. And that is a pretty pro tip, I would say. And moving on to the eventual winner, look at how fast Malcolm Stewart comes in by a lot of the riders. They were either rolling this corner like what Kenny's doing, and then double into the whoops. And you've got Mookie where he's going double, triple, and he just carries so much speed. And this is the reason as to why he was able to win, is he was accelerating into the whoops where a lot of the other guys are just into him. So here, we'll see another instance of this with the crash with Sexton. So again, you've got Mookie over here that's tripling in, and watch Sexton as he almost coasts into the whoops, where Mookie's accelerating. And what happened to Sexton? So if we slow this down, you have sort of the same thing that happened to Pierce Brown. This is why you try to stay out of the middle, is because your ass end's going to get kicked all over because of the curbs in there. And the suspension's just going to do what it's going to do. And so ass end gets kicked. He goes over to one of the sharper parts of the whoops and he lets off because what happens again? He doesn't want to hit those tough blocks. So he gets his weight off and boom, he goes down. Again, I feel as if the tough blocks were in the middle. Sexton may have been able to win this race because he would have saved himself, where he wouldn't have gotten spooked like, oh no, I'm going to hit this brick wall or this cinder block that's going to make me crash. And so ironically, what ends up happening? He ends up crashing himself by trying to avoid what object is there to help save him. But ironically, it pretty much put multiple guys down over Tampa there in Florida. So we'll watch that in real time, and you can see how much time Mookie catches up and what Sexton does to avoid the tough block. And you know Sexton knew that he was being caught, so it was in the back of his mind. And that might have, where it was just a brain fart, lack of a better terminology there. But this is the breakdown of round 5. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, keep it WFO. Ba-ra-da-da-da-da-da.